Hello, welcome to this ITLIVE session. My name is Manuel Garcia. I'm part of the Global Links consulting team. I'm a consultant specialized in process maturity and IT governance. I'm also the operations manager for Global Links. And today I want to present to you, or I want to speak about this subject that I consider to be very important in today's IT organizations. One of the discussions that I have had with people, mostly on the Agile and DevOps side of the organization, is that of whether process maturity is still necessary in an Agile environment. And people who are on the far left of things, people who are very I would say involved in the Agile side of organizations and DevOps and these like DevOps consultants and DevOps evangelists, all these kind of people, they consider processes to be a bottleneck for the organization because all their mindset is around innovation, which is something that the business needs to improve the services and deliver continuous services to their customers in the digital age. And that's true. The businesses do need innovation. But what about process maturity? And on the other hand, people on the operational side of organizations still consider processes, and moreover mature processes, to be very, very important and necessary to maintain the operations of an IT organization. So in this conversation, in this presentation, I want to discuss whether process maturity is still necessary in an Agile environment. And well, the short answer to that is yes, it's still necessary, but it has to be balanced. And that's precisely what we will discuss in this presentation: how to balance innovation with operational excellence to deliver both innovation and process maturity in your IT organization. So let's get started. And in order to understand better the rationale or the driver that is creating this need to balance these two aspects in an IT organization, first we need to understand how the environment of IT organizations has evolved over time. So let's go back to history a little bit. Anybody who's over 30 years old will remember the client-server era, where we all had our personal computers. PCs were not common at homes back then, but before the 90s, late 80s, and by the beginning of the 90s, everybody started to have a computer at home, and then computers were connected to the internet, and you could access some services. But from an infrastructure perspective, from an IT organization perspective, this era was known as the client-server era, where you had your computer and then you had a mainframe on the other side, where your computer connected to access all the services. So that's back in the 90s. Then when we started the new millennium, homes had the advantage of or the benefit to have access to high-speed internet. So this opened a world of possibilities for businesses, because once everybody had access to the internet, then businesses started to market their services through the internet so that consumers could access their services through their personal computers. And then moving forward to the 2010s, everybody started getting a smartphone that was connected to the internet, and now the mobility of users was even larger. So everybody could access a service through their phone, not only their computer, through the connection of the internet. And then nowadays we have 4.7 billion internet users worldwide. So just imagine the dimension of people who are using the internet, and all these are potential customers for businesses. So I wanted to explain this because this is how the world has evolved. This is a change that has impacted the world. And this is creating a world of possibilities for businesses to market their services with users who are accessing these services through the internet. So this is like the core of digital transformation, or the driver behind digital transformation, with other variables around it, of course, but this is how services have evolved over time. And following this evolution, the IT organizations also have evolved over time. Back in the 90s and even early 2000s, IT organizations had a focus on operational support, on infrastructure, and IT services to enable the value delivery to customers, right? So back then, when everything was client server, well, the focus of IT was, well, providing the infrastructure that could enable that connection and that connectivity so that users could access their services through the network and through the internet and all that. So this is something that is still happening in IT organizations. Everything is different now with the cloud and infrastructure as a service and all this. But in essence, it's still all the same, right? So what was the need when IT organizations faced this challenge of providing this operational excellence to support the operations of users from their computers to the mainframes through the internet? Well, the need was having processes in place that could shape all the operations and all the management that the IT organizations were performing back then. So processes, standards, control, governance, maturity in those processes, all that became very important. And that shaped the mindset of IT executives so that they could excel in delivering value to their customers through the services that the IT organization provided. So frameworks like ITIL, ISO 20000, COVID, all these frameworks were very, very important, and people looked to them to obtain the best practices and a lot of guidance to implement all these services. But as the evolution that we just saw on the previous slide continued, the needs for the IT organization also changed. So nowadays, well, in the 2010s and 2020s, the focus of IT organizations have changed given all the possibilities that were open through the impact of the internet in the world. So now businesses and IT organizations are focused on providing digital services to their customers, developing software, creating new functionalities, innovating the services that they provide so that the services that were traditionally delivered through business assets, think of a bank, for example, now can be delivered through the internet, like internet banking, for example. So that's all innovation, and that's part of digital transformation that has changed the way in which businesses do business with their customers, right? So IT supporting all that digital transformation, that's probably a word of a completely separate conversation, but IT is shaping or is performing the activities on behalf of the business now. So there's a saying that says that IT is no longer supporting the business, now IT runs the business, or IT is the business, right? So the need now on the IT organization side is to have flexibility, adaptability, agility to enable this digital transformation of services. So where are we standing now? I mean, on one side, we need operational excellence to maintain the infrastructure. We need mature processes. We need all these best practices to shape the management of the services that we're delivering to the customers. And on the other hand, we need to continuously change, to continuously evolve to meet the new needs of our customers in the form of innovation, right? Or innovative services. So where are we now? Now we're in a balance where on one side we have precisely innovation, and on the other side we have operational excellence. And the question here is, what does the business need? Well, the business, in order to provide value to their customers, they need both. They cannot compromise operational excellence for the sake of innovation. And they cannot ignore innovation or forget about innovation to focus only on operational excellence. They need both. So how do we balance these two concepts? On the left side, we have innovation, which is supported by approaches like DevOps, Agile, automation, experimentation, etc. A lot of recently created or recently presented concepts that are changing the way in which IT organizations work. And on the right side, we have operational excellence supported by processes, by operational frameworks, by governance, compliance, maturity, risk management, all these approaches that have been long used by IT organizations since they started the modern operations as we know them. So how do we balance these two? And this is the challenge, and this is where the struggle of IT organizations is nowadays. And as we see here from two quotes from two CIOs from important corporations, global corporations, we see that the struggle is real, but also the success in balancing these two, innovation and operational excellence, that is something that can be achieved. That is not something that is impossible. That is something that can be achieved, successfully achieved. So another factor here to consider is, as the second quote says, is the pandemic. We know that the pandemic has accelerated a lot of the transformation that businesses were prone to, and the plans they had for 10 years, well, they had to fast forward those plans to this recent 1 or 2 years, so that the digitalization of services has been accelerated in an impressive way. But on the other hand, as we see here, the efforts and the investments that they have put into operational excellence have also paid off in terms of resiliency, which enables also the agility for the business, right? So how do we balance these two? And this is what we're going to discuss in the rest of the presentation. So in order to understand better how to balance process maturity, which is a synonym of operational excellence, with innovation and agility, let's go back to the concepts and let's understand better what do we mean when we mention or when we talk about process maturity. What does process maturity mean? Process maturity, from a definition perspective, is the extent to which a process is considered complete and capable of achieving continual improvement. There are many approaches for process maturity, for assessing the maturity of a process. Probably the most widely used is CMMI. That's something that a lot of people are familiar with. But the one that I like most is the one from ISO, the ISO standard, the 33001 standard. And that's very similar to CMMI. This standard gives us 5 levels of maturity, which are the ones that you see here, which are also called capability levels of the process. And each of these levels is defined by different process attributes. So in order to determine whether the process is at level 2, for example, at a managed level, we need to assess 2 different attributes of our process. We need to assess the performance of the process, whether the process is being performed or not, and how that performance is being managed, and also what are the work products or the outputs that the process is providing, and how these work products are being managed, and so forth for the rest of the levels. I will not go into detail to this because, again, this is also something worth of a separate conversation, and it's something that we will cover on a later presentation in ITLIVE, and how to perform a process maturity assessment. But for the sake of understanding, process maturity is just a scale in which the process fulfills its goals, delivering a quality service to the customer who uses that process, and moreover, how the process is committed to continual improvement. One of the challenges that happen across processes implementation in IT organizations is that the processes have become the goal on themselves. In other words, we need to remember that the process is just a means to deliver a result, to manage a service, to manage a better service. So the process is a means, or is supposed to be a means to an end, not an end on itself. And in many cases, processes have become the goal of IT organizations. So think, for example, of an incident management process. Many organizations struggle to meet the requirements and the metrics and the goals of a process they have implemented, forgetting about the real goal of the process, which is supporting a better service to my customers. So the goal is not the process on itself. The goal should be a better service, a managed service to my customer, right? Or a better way of managing the service that I'm delivering to my customer. So that's one of the things that is important to highlight when we talk about process maturity, because we need to understand that process maturity is not about the process itself. I mean, yes, the definition says a process is considered complete, but complete, what does it mean that a process is complete? I mean, if ITIL gives me, for example, if I get a framework or DevOps or whichever you want, it gives you a set of practices or requirements that you need to have in your process. Well, does that mean that my process needs to have all of that? Well, it will depend on my organization. What are my customers' needs? What are the needs of the customer from that process? Does it make sense for my organization that my process is that complete or that robust? And we'll get to agile processes in a couple slides here. But this is what we're talking about. The components of the process should not exceed the requirements and the needs from the customer. If we have processes that have too much components to them and too many metrics, and if the process is way too much robust, more than necessary, then that's not going to be a good process. That's going to be a bottleneck. So when we talk to these guys who are on the far left of things, of innovation, agile, DevOps, and all these, who consider processes to be bottlenecks, probably is because they have faced processes like these that are very slow, and that slow down the rate of innovation and change that the organization needs through their innovation practices, right? So a mature process is not necessarily a process that is complex. That is the word, complex. A mature process is a process that will align or will be aligned to the needs of the customers of the organization, right? And continual improvement of the process is very important, because the more we improve our process, yes, the more mature it will be, but also the better value or the better results it will deliver to my customer. So let's not forget about concepts like customer outcomes. What are the customer outcomes that we want to achieve, or what are the outcomes that we want to achieve through our process, so that we don't lose focus and vision of what our processes need to be like, right? So a mature process, again, is not a synonym of a complex process. A mature process, a true mature process, is a process that is aligned with the needs of the organization. And we will go deeper into that in a few slides here as well. And on the other side of the definitions, we have agility, which is one of the newer needs of IT organizations. So why do IT organizations need to be agile? Well, because everything is changing very fast, as we saw on the first slides. Everything keeps evolving. The needs from the customers and the users and the market is constantly changing. So we need to be able to understand what's happening and react quickly and easily to that. So that is what agility really means, right? Having the ability of moving quickly and easily, and the ability to think and understand quickly. Okay, so that's what an IT organization needs. And the core, probably, of the concept of agility is the Agile Manifesto, widely known by IT professionals. Scrum is based on this manifesto as well, or the principles of Scrum are aligned with this. And the Agile Manifesto, basically what it says is that while traditional, the things that have been traditionally pursued by IT organizations are important, which are the ones at the right here, the ones on the left are more important. So the Agile Manifesto had a very positive impact in IT back in the 2010 or 2012, something around those years, because it kind of provided a change of mindset in individuals and professionals working in IT, so that they looked at the things that were truly important as part of the operation that they had. So let me give you the examples. So people were traditionally focused on processes and tools. That was the focus of IT back then on the early 2000s, right? We need processes, we need tools, we need to enable the infrastructure so that my users can use the services that they want to access. So yes, processes and tools are important, but individuals and their interactions are more important than processes and tools. So in other words, the processes and the tools are the means to an end, which is enabling the individuals to interact and to obtain the services that they want. That is the real goal of processes and tools. The same way, comprehensive documentation, talking about software, for example, is important. But what is more important and what provides actual value to my users is delivering software that works, working software, right? That is what enables the outcome from my customers, not the documentation. It doesn't mean that these elements on the right are not important. They are very important, but the ones on the left are more important. Contract negotiations are important, but customer collaboration is what really matters. And responding to change is way more important than being able to follow a plan. So just to mention the Agile Manifesto that has shaped the way in which IT organizations work. And as you can see, these two definitions are very different to each other, because on the one hand, we have process maturity, which is having complete processes that pursue continual improvement. And on the other hand, we have agility, the Agile Manifesto, that tells me that processes are not really important. So where is process maturity left then in all this? Well, there needs to be a balance, as we described before, right? So thinking of a process, going to the subject of the presentation, a mature process or an agile process, for example, the balance between both. Thinking of a process, think of a traditional process, a process that you have in your organization, whichever it is. If we break down the components and the parts that should be present in a process, both on the process definition and on the process design, we will find that there are a lot of components that make it difficult to make a process both mature and agile, because we have policies, we have goals, objectives, metrics, a description, we have triggers, who are the suppliers and customers, and all these elements need to be defined as part of the process document, right? The inputs and outputs, the activities, the workflows, the roles and responsibilities, the process maps, the terms and definitions. So think of a robust process that gets more and more complex with time as the needs of the organization that uses this process evolve. And think now of a mature process that needs to be taken up to maturity level 5 for the sake of making it a better process on itself, right? And now the question is, do all processes need to be of a maturity level 5, for example, based on the capability levels that we saw on that slide? Probably. It depends on the process, right? Not every process will need to be a 5 level of maturity. Of course, that's something that all organizations will pursue, being at a maturity level 5 at all their processes. But for some processes, it will be a waste of time and resources and effort bringing them to a maturity level 5 where the process is automated and everything is innovative and all this, when the process is probably just something that is supporting a very small component of the operation of the business. While there are other processes or activities that are more important in the organization that need to be supported, and that's where efforts should be put on, right? And probably that's something that we're ignoring. So it is very important to prioritize which processes we focus to make them more mature than others. But again, that's a subject for a separate conversation. So think of a traditional process with all the things that it needs to have in place in order to be a process, and then a mature process. And that looks kind of scary because there are many things that need to be improved as part of the process. But where do we get the balance between a mature process and a process that enables agility, that is not a bottleneck for innovation and for DevOps and agility and all those components? Well, we need to think of just enough processes. What does just enough mean? Just enough means the right amount of the right kind at the right time. Just enough is a synonym of lean. Like lean management, all this discipline comes to IT now. Lean IT is some kind of current that or mainstream that many people are looking into. And just enough processes has to do. This concept has to do with lean processes. If we don't have a process, then we have chaos, which is not necessarily bad. That's something that, again, worth of a separate conversation. But if we don't have a process, we have chaos, and nobody knows what to do. If we have too much process, or if we have process that is way too mature or way too complex, that means paralysis. Like these organizations, like banks, for example, that have release management processes that restrict or limit the number of releases that they can do per month. And some organizations have a policy that they cannot do more than 2 releases per month. And on the other hand, you have a DevOps and an Agile software development team trying to make hundreds of releases per day. So that's a shock for everyone, right? So that's because the process is too much, way too much. What we need to get to is to define just enough processes, which are processes with the right balance of control on the components of the process that need to have control, and agility on the on the parts of the process or the pieces of the process that need to enable this agility for the sake of the business. Right, and that's something that we will discuss on next slide. How do we prioritize our processes, and how do we balance each of these based or in alignment with my business needs? And just enough is not something that applies only to a process. It also applies to analysis, design, code, standardization, management, and other practices or other components of the operation of an IT organization or a business. So this is something to think about. This requires some analysis of the processes, some re-engineering also of the processes that we currently have, and that requires some effort, but that's something that is worth of addressing. We cannot forget about transforming our processes from traditional processes to just enough processes. It is worth mentioning or highlighting that just enough processes will, in most cases, will be enabled or supported by automation. So things or activities that were used to do manually now are going to be automated. But again, it has its degree of complexity, but that's the balance that we need to achieve, having just enough processes so that they do not become a bottleneck as traditional processes, which are very robust and complex. Just enough processes are lean and scalable. That means that a process that has only the necessary activities to deliver the value that my customer needs can be used either to process one request or 100 or 1,000 of requests. So that means that a process is scalable, and also I can build on top of that process to make it better, right? A just enough process will reflect the Agile values and principles, similar to the Agile manifesto that we saw. So the process, a just enough process, will not get you lost or will not confuse you in terms of, okay, so who do I need to serve now, my process or my customer? No, the just enough process or a just enough process will always be a means to an end, which is that you can deliver a better value and enable actual outcomes to your customer. A just enough process, since it's just enough, it will be able to respond quickly to feedback so that you can adjust the process as necessary. And that is something that is also important. A mature process, a truly mature process at level 5, is a process that is committed with continual improvement. And continual improvement nowadays does not mean making it more robust every time. It means changing it continuously to align to my customer requirements and to the feedback that I'm getting on the performance of my process and the value that it is delivering to my customer. So that's what a mature process will achieve. And we can start seeing now the similarity or the pieces that a mature process has in common with a just enough process. So they are not opposite to each other. They complement each other. A mature process can be a just enough process, and a just enough process can be a mature process. That's the way it's intended to be. So maturity is not opposite to agility. On the other hand, it's complementary if we approach it with the right mindset, right? So if we have just enough process, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to have maturity level 2 or 3 processes. No, I can have maturity level 5 processes, but being just enough processes. So that is the challenge, and that is the beauty of lean processes, that you can shape them in whichever way your organization needs. And as I mentioned earlier, just enough processes will leverage on technology and automation as well. So that's something important to consider as well. And then let's think of, I have mentioned a couple of times through the presentation that processes need to be aligned with my organization, my organizational goals or my business goals. So if we think of a very operational process that we have in place, again, let's think of incident management or think of problem management, for example. These processes are usually implemented or adopted following a bottom-up approach. That means, well, I will adopt a process because someone told me that I had to adopt this process or to implement this process, or because I do need a way to manage the incidents or the problems in my organization. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I grant you that you need a process for that. That's right. But think of a more, let's think of DevOps. DevOps is not a process, but there are some practices embedded or involved in DevOps. And there are many organizations adopting these DevOps as a process. They are documenting the practices they're going to follow. They are defining the steps they will follow. So they are somehow defining a process for DevOps, if you will. Why does the organization need DevOps? Many organizations adopt processes or practices because they have heard that other organizations are doing it. So that's the bottom-up approach. I start doing it at the operational level, and then I will figure out what goals from my business I can enable through these processes that I am adopting or implementing. And that's a mistake. And that's something that leads the organization to have a lot of processes in place that are not delivering the value that the business needs. And that represents, or that is translated into a lot of waste, a lot of budget, a lot of effort, a lot of work, and a lot of frustration, because people are working with assets, with a lot of things and components and practices and tools and that are nonsense for the business. And on the other side of the organization, at the top level, you have business managers, you have customers, you have users complaining about the service that the IT organization is delivering. So how do we change this? How do we change this approach? Well, we need to follow a top-down approach to define which processes, which practices will deliver the best value to my organization. So before implementing or adopting or renewing or re-engineering any of your processes, think of what are your enterprise goals. And this model here on screen is taken from COVID 2019, which is the most widely used reference for corporate governance for IT, which is very useful. And this is a very simple model, but this is something that executives sometimes forget about. So the first thing that we need to understand when we're going to define processes, or the degree to which our processes need to be mature, for example, the first thing that we need to do is understand what is my environment, the top layer here. What is my environment? What are the things that are driving the way in which my users are consuming the services, or the way in which my customers are buying the services from the business, right? So these drivers, the things that are happening in the environment, just the things that are changing out there, will influence and in many instances even determine the needs of my stakeholders, right? I will not go in depth into this. These are described as the components of value, the three boxes that you see here, but I will not get into that. But it's at a high level, it's only understanding what does my customer need. And based on that, the business will have enterprise goals or business goals defined. Every business has a very structured or a very limited list of goals. And that's something that every business knows, right? And those enterprise goals need to be translated into IT goals. So what are the capabilities that IT needs to have in place in order to support the capabilities that the business needs? So if my business needs to have happier customers, how does IT can support that goal that the business has, right? And the IT goals, the goals that we define at an IT organization level, these goals need to be aligned with the business goals. And then when we start defining the different enablers or the different assets that we have in IT, of which processes is one of them, I have the list of enablers here, but processes being one of these enablers, what are the goals of my process, or what does the goal for my process need to be, so that with my process I support my IT goals, right? So if we change the mindset, if we change the approach on how we define the goals of my process, and we do it this way from a top down approach instead of a bottom up approach, it will be easier for them to understand to what extent our processes need to be mature, automated, agile, robust, what components of the process need to be focused on control and operational excellence, and what components of my process need to enable for agility and innovation, for example. So just applying this model, which is very simple, can help us balance this this balance that we saw on a previous slide between innovation and operational excellence when we are defining our processes. So just something to think about, something to really look further into, because COVID is a very, very powerful tool for businesses and IT organizations to shape the way they do their strategies. And again, focusing on capabilities that will enable the actual goals of the IT organization and the business. And another aspect that is very important to have in place in order to achieve this balance is to have a strategic mindset and have governance in place, which is linked to the concept that we just discussed. And for this reason, I included here the ITIL 4 service life cycle. I mean, the service value system, which is the new model for ITIL 4. The service value system is, again, a very simple model that just shapes the activities that are delivering value to my customers. So at the core of this model, we have the service value chain, which are the business activities, not necessarily IT activities, the business activities, some of them jointly performed with the IT organization, that convert or transform opportunity and demand in the market to value to the customers. And it is important to understand that the processes that the IT organization has been traditionally performing, like incident management, change management, problem, service level, all these are now put here as practices, no longer processes, but now practices that support the activities in the service value chain. So what do I mean when I say having a strategic mindset in IT? Well, having a strategic mindset means thinking from a business perspective and no longer from an IT operational perspective. If you are someone working in an IT organization, you need to understand that the processes that you work with on a daily basis are just the means to an end, which is delivering value to your customer, to your business customers, right? And the processes that you put all your effort on are just something that are supporting activities at a higher level, which are the activities that the business and the rest of the organization is performing to deliver this value to the customers. That's part of the strategic mindset, probably one of the most important parts of the strategic mindset that I'm talking about. And the other thing that is important is having this governance in place. Governance is just what we just covered on the previous slide, which is how do we align the goals of my IT organization with my business, and then how do I enable all these goals of my IT organization through the assets that I have in my organization? What capabilities do I need to achieve in order to support my business? And how do I get to those capabilities, or how do I enable those capabilities through the assets that I have in place, which my processes are part or one of those assets that I have, or enablers as COVID calls them, right? And other pieces of this strategic mindset are the ones that we see here on the right side, which are the guiding principles in ITIL 4. I will not go in detail into each of these, but probably the one that is worth highlighting is the first one: focus on value. This is something that everybody needs to have on their mind. We need to focus on value. If we have a part of my process that is not delivering any value to my customer, to my users, to my business, well, get rid of that. If that is not delivering any value, don't do it anymore. That is something very, very important. And this is probably the first step in adopting a strategic mindset in order to support the business and digital transformation. And just to finish our conversation, my final personal recommendations for achieving this balance between innovation and operational excellence. Well, the first one is prioritize innovation based on the business vision, right? Do not try to innovate everything in your IT organization. There is a world, a universe of possibilities to innovate and do new things and offer new functionalities and new features and new platforms, new technology, new automation. But wait, how do you prioritize that? The cheapest one, the one that is going to take you less time to do, the one that is going to require less effort? Not necessarily. Focus on the things that will support the business based on the vision they have. So that's part of the importance of having this strategic mindset, that we learn to think from a business perspective. What does my business want to achieve, and how can I enable these goals that my business wants to achieve, right? The second tip that I have for you is watch out for technical and cultural debt. Technical and cultural debt is a concept that comes from from forgetting about the technical aspects and also the cultural aspects in my organization. And this is something metaphorical or philosophical, if you will, that has caused many organizations to struggle with innovation because they never paid attention to the technology. So now they are struggling with legacy systems that are very hard to move to the cloud, for example, or to automate or embed or make part of a DevOps or an Agile environment. So that's something to watch out for. And also the culture. The culture in your organization is as important or probably more important than your processes, your practices, and your automation. If you do automation and focus on infrastructure and technology and the cloud and the RPA and all these new trends that are coming, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and forget about the culture, well, let me tell you that it's going to be like a debt. In a few years, you're going to get the bill of that, and you will have to pay a very expensive bill for not paying attention to the cultural aspects now. Number three, pay attention to what your users and customers are saying. Focus on your customer journey. See your services from your customer's perspective. See what their experience is being with your business, with your users. Look at your incident management process. Look at reports coming from that process, because that's going to tell you what your users are feeling like and what are the pains that your users are suffering. Go to business relationship management, customer relationship interactions that you have in your organization, because that's going to give you a lot of valuable information so that you can determine what the value needs to be like for your customers. Pay attention to what your users and customers are saying. Do not forget about them, because they are the most important ones for your business. Leverage on collaboration, automation, and new approaches. There are constantly new approaches, new technologies, new tools that are out there that we can use. So go out to the market and see what's available, not only from a technological perspective, but also from a management approaches perspective, like DevOps, for example, or Lean, or I don't know, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these new practices that are being adopted by organizations worldwide, so that you can understand what opportunities you have to leverage on to make your business better. But again, do not prioritize based on your internal IT perspective. Go back to number one, prioritize innovation based on the business strategy. And last but not least, develop new skills and capabilities across your workforce. The more advancements we find in IT organizations, in technology, tools, automation, all this, the more the more skills and capabilities people will need in order to manage all this. The classical roles or the traditional roles in IT organizations are changing, especially on the operation side. The more we are automating things through DevOps and all the concepts around it, the less that we require people on the operational side of the organization doing repetitive tasks. So we need to change the focus of these people so that they are no longer doing routine tasks, because now we have robots, we have tools doing all that, but they need to be more of a management layer in the organization who makes the sound decisions and the right decisions to determine what is the direction where the organization needs to go. So there's a new set of skills and capabilities, many of them yet to be defined, that people need to focus on. And the workforce development is one of the strongest or biggest pains in organizations nowadays, because there are a lot of people in the organization, but not everyone has their skills and capabilities for this digital age. So it seems like technology has gone farther than our capability or our capacity to manage all that technology. So we need to think of what are these skills and capabilities that we need to develop in our internal workforce. So I hope that these tips are useful for you, that this presentation has been productive, and that hopefully you learned something through this. So we're out of time, but I just want to thank you for staying with me till the end, and stay tuned for more of our ITLIVE presentations. Thank you very much.